And we're live. We're recording.
All right.
We're doing it.
Good. We're doing it.
How are you doing today, Vicky?
I am doing quite well, actually.
Quite well.
Yes.
Quite
I have
well.
not been doing very well.
No, why not?
Well, I struggle with depression and anxiety, and so I was hospitalized in a partial hospitalization program a couple weeks ago. So it's been a little rough, but I'm getting back into the swing of things. So
Yeah.
yeah.
How was that for you? Depression and anxiety.
It's hard. I have struggled with depression since I was in high school. I then lost my dad to suicide in 2010. And so depression has always been a part of my life. It seems like I've been hospitalized multiple times. And it's just something that I've learned to live with. It's a chronic illness, just like diabetes or anything else. And sometimes I need some extra help, and I get that, and then I'm okay for a while. And
What kind of things do you do to help mitigate the depression and anxiety? Because like a lot of people, they'll have like by the way, this is a bad start to a podcast.
I'm
we
sorry.
No, not your fault. We just jumped right into all the heavy stuff. I kind of we'll backtrack a little bit, but for you, what do you do to help mitigate like the depression, anxiety? Do you work out, or do you go for walks, listen to music? What kind of things help you?
I do a lot of yoga, and I do a lot of art. I paint. And I paint, and I paint, and I paint.
What kind of art do you do? Like, what kind of things do you paint?
Flowers, mandalas.
Okay.
Things that...
Like realistic type stuff? Or is it like...
They're a little realistic, I guess.
Okay.
But, I mean, I'm not a professional artist by any means.
Is anybody? I mean, what defines a professional artist?
True. I do sell my art, so I guess that makes me a professional, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, by definition of Mike Marriott, do you know who he is?
I don't.
He runs the Opportunity Arts in Lansing.
Oh.
And he works with different artists, but his definition of an artist is somebody who sells their work. Like, you could paint all you want, draw all you want, but that doesn't necessarily make you an artist, which I don't know if I agree with that.
Yeah.
However, his definition is, somebody who does it for a living or tries to do it for a living.
Yeah, and I don't do it for a living. I do it for me. I do it to get my feelings out. And then my hope is that my art will bring motivation and hope to other people to keep going and to keep fighting for in whatever fight they're fighting.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now, let's backtrack a little bit.
I'm sorry. I'm very, very open with my mental health. And
that's awesome. That's important. It's very important.
Yeah.
I like my listeners to be able to get to know who the person is, what they do for a living, where they're from, all that jazz. And I skipped that.
I skipped that. I apologize.
No need to apologize. Makes it for a very interesting. It might actually pull people in. They might be like, "What's going on here?"
Right.
So, so tell me a little bit about yourself. Are you from Lansing? Did you grow up here?
I grew up in Sunfield, which is
a small town,
tiny little place.
Yeah.
But I grew up coming into Lansing, for shopping and stuff like that. I now live in Charlotte.
Oh, that's where I'm from.
Okay.
Yeah.
With my husband and 3 dogs.
Big dogs, like German
yes,
Shepherds?
Big dogs. I've got a German Shepherd, an Australian Shepherd, and then some mix of something.
That's crazy.
Yes, we are a little crazy.
So you live in Charlotte. How long have you lived in Charlotte?
6 years.
Do you like it?
I do.
Yeah,
I do.
It's quaint, right?
Yeah, I do. It's very nice. I can walk to my gym. I can walk to my bar.
That's important.
It's important. That's great.
That's really important for mental health.
Yeah.
All jokes. But no, I mean, sometimes it is important because it's a social life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it allows you to be able to just, go to the bar, drink, and walk home and hang out with friends easily.
Yep.
Yeah, it's important. So, what do you do for a living? You obviously don't
I
paint for a living or do art for a
I
living.
don't. I am an ultrasound tech
Oh, Sparrow?
at Spectrum in
Oh.
Hastings.
Oh, wow. That's quite the drive.
It is a drive, and it's a little rough. not even gonna lie. But I'm actually going to be going back to school for recreation therapy, which is someone who does art or music or movement therapy for rehab centers or psych hospitals. My goal is to work at a psychiatric hospital at some point and be able to share my art and stuff with other patients. So
Art is definitely important for mental health, right? Like as far as like helping people through mental health and all that jazz, right?
Yeah. I mean, it allows people to put their
Express.
emotions on paper, like art or writing too, or music. Either of those. I mean, there's so many ways that people can express themselves with their mental health, through exercise, art, music, reading, writing. I did a little bit of writing. I wrote a book called Depression Confessions.
Wow, what is that about?
It
Depression,
is,
obviously,
yes.
but
Well, it goes into my confessions and my truths about living with depression. So it goes through what it's like to be diagnosed with depression, the recovery process, the relapse process, feeling suicidal. And then it also goes through losing someone to suicide and loving someone who struggles. And then there are 50 other people who submitted confessions as well.
wow.
So it's a pretty cool thing that I did.
Is it published?
It is.
Wow.
You can get it on Amazon.
Wow.
Yep.
That's incredible.
I self-published through Amazon, and it was super easy, and I donate all the money that I get from it to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention.
Wow. Very cool. That is awesome.
Thank you.
So, so people can just go to Amazon, order that. I'll put the links in the show notes for this.
Okay.
Yeah. That way people know. And I think I might order that. That sounds interesting.
Yeah.
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 How long did it take you to write it?
It actually didn't take me very long because I had been posting these confessions on Facebook. Like I said, I'm very open with my mental health, and so I would post these confessions on my Facebook feed so that other people could see them and learn about depression as it was happening in my life.
What's the feedback like for that? I know that's another question that's going to go down a different rabbit hole.
No, it's pretty positive actually. Most people are very supportive.
This episode is brought to you by Red Bike Delivery. This delivery service operates only using battery-powered, eco-friendly transportation. Red Bike Delivery is there for all your delivery needs, whether it's dinner for the family, flowers for your partner, or new houseplants for your new collection. Red Bike Delivery will gladly deliver those and everything in between. So what are you waiting for? Check out Red Bike Delivery on Facebook or Instagram for more information. Red Bike Delivery, because there's only one Earth.
It's usually at an art show or another volunteering event or something where I will get people that say, it's all in your head.
Wow.
If you just prayed more or if you just smiled more.
Are you religious?
I am not.
Okay. So when somebody says you need to pray more, what does that feel like? How does that make you feel?
Conflicted.
Yeah.
Because I know that that's not what's going to fix me.
Yeah.
It may fix someone somewhere. But for me, it's going to be my medication. It's going to be my therapy. It's a scientific medical illness that I have. And praying about it isn't
It's
really
not the
gonna,
fix.
it's not gonna fix it. Just like going outside more, or have you gone for a walk? Have you read this book? I'm like, oh, you guys.
Isn't it kind of weird when like a religious person, and I'm not shitting on religious people, but isn't it kind of weird? Isn't it kind of weird when you tell them about something and they're like, just something that happened, and they're like, "Oh, I'll pray for you," or "I'll pray for that." Like,
Yeah, and
that's not what I was trying to get from you.
right. And I have people who do that, and I accept it. Sometimes they'll want to hold my hand.
It's definitely a nice gesture, right? For
Yeah.
somebody to be like, "Oh, I'll pray for you."
I take it.
They mean well.
I take it as a positive response.
Yeah.
Before or otherwise a not positive response. Because some people get very defensive or very overpowering.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So when did you write the book? When was that? When did you release it? I know that was part of the question I asked, like how long it took, and you were like, it didn't take very long because you found
Yes.
you had been writing it
Yes.
on Facebook or
So
posting.
it was, I think, 2018.
Oh, okay.
So
right before the pandemic.
yes.
Okay.
Yes, actually.
That was an important time.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's very important because that's when people's mental health really started going crazy.
Yes.
So being somebody who struggles with mental health and depression and anxiety, that was probably one of the worst times for people during COVID when they were stuck home. They couldn't go do anything. They couldn't go to that bar that's right around the corner. They couldn't go to a gym at all. What kind of effects did COVID have on you?
Oh, it was bad. It was my worst hospitalization. I was hospitalized. So I got COVID in October of 2020. And afterwards, I just had so much anxiety and so much depression. It was also the 10-year anniversary of my dad's suicide. So it all kind of compiled together. And my therapist was not really working out because I couldn't see her in person. I couldn't see my psychiatrist in person. It was awful. And then when I finally actually was sick enough to where I needed to be hospitalized, not from COVID, from depression, I was still testing.
Thanks for specifying.
Yes, I was still testing positive for COVID.
Wow.
And so they couldn't place me anywhere. So I had to stay at the hospital for, I don't know how long it was, 3 or 4 days, because no one would take me. No one would help me.
Wow.
And it was one of the worst experiences of my life. And it just continued. I mean, this process, this hospitalization, in and out, took probably 6 months.
Wow.
And this is my first relapse since then. So it's been kind of scary, but.
And that was just a few weeks ago?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And how long did you spend in the hospital just a few weeks ago?
I did a partial hospitalization program.
What does that mean?
So I only went during the day.
Oh.
And we did like group therapy, art therapy, nursing. So like how does food affect mental health and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I did that for about 2.5 weeks. And it's a great program.
So what kind of food does affect mental health? I mean, I know, but
like the same foods that are good for your physical health.
Yeah.
The leafy greens, the vitamins,
it's good for your mental health.
Yes. The fats from nuts and fish and.
So have you changed your diet since then, or what have you noticed that like when you eat certain things that your mental health kind of curbs?
Not so much eating, but if I drink a lot of alcohol, my depression and anxiety will tend to get worse for a few days. So I really don't drink very often anymore. Um, yeah.
Wow. So I could imagine that being in and out of in and out of like mental hospitals could give you like a title amongst other people. Like, oh, wow, that person's crazy.
hmm
She's just a crazy person. What kind of what kind of what kind of like I guess feedback would be the word. What kind of feedback have you had from other individuals that are close to you and the way their perspectives of you? What are those like?
Um, it's mostly positive. Mostly, people are grateful that I went to get help, because they would rather have me alive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, they're proud of me for getting help. They encourage me to further get help. Even my coworkers who are uh, being now short staffed because I'm not working, even they encouraged me to get help, even though they knew it was going to cause them
More
a lot
work.
of headaches.
Yeah.
So that in itself was very reassuring and important to me to get the help that I needed.
Is it easy for somebody who has an employer to get time off for mental health, or
Not
is it difficult?
not always. I am lucky enough that I qualified for FMLA,
Okay.
or short term disability, and um,
So what would somebody have to do if they didn't qualify? Because I mean, for FMLA, you have to acquire so many hours within the year, right? That's how it works at my place, at my employer.
I'm not really sure, to be honest. I just filled out the paperwork.
Fair enough.
When you're in that depression,
You don't
you
even want to
miss
do
the
paperwork.
no,
Yeah.
you miss the details. You don't want to do anything. You want to sleep. You want to die sometimes.
Yeah.
And
So when you're in a state of depression, what is that like for you? Are you typically like just laid up in bed, or do you just can you still function like around the house? Like, can you do normal daily activities, and or like are you just kind of just going through life, like I don't know, like
like a ghost.
yeah, like a ghost.
I can function most of the time, but it's very hard and I don't want to. And there's a lot of crying. People who know me know that when I'm crying, just let me cry. I'm okay. If I'm not okay, I will ask, um, but I do tend to sleep a lot. I don't eat. Uh, yeah, it's a struggle.
Yeah, yeah, I could imagine. I don't I don't really suffer from like depression, maybe some anxiety every now and then, but um so I don't really understand like personally like what that would be like, but I know that like a lot of people who are depressed or have anxiety, they find other ways to like I guess drown it or get
hmm
like curb it, I guess, like
hmm
by like drinking or doing
Yes.
drugs or like anything really, eating, all kinds of different things.
And when I was, how old would I, or how long ago would that have been? I don't even know. 8 years ago, it was the first hospitalization. It was the first time my depression had gotten so bad that I was having thoughts of killing myself. Um, I did turn to drinking and abusing my prescription drugs. And luckily, my family knew the signs, based on my dad's suicide and stuff like that. And so I was able to get help before anything developed into too bad of a habit or
Okay.
a problem. But yeah, it was an easy way out of
Right.
my head.
Right.
But that's just not the healthy
But then it kind of
healthy way to do it.
gives you other problems on top
It
of that,
does.
right?
It does.
Yeah. makes everything a little bit more difficult.
Yes. Yes.
Wow. So at what point did you become kind of an advocate for suicide prevention?
So my dad died in 2010, and I found my first Out of the Darkness walk in 2011. So I've actually been a volunteer with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention for 11 years now. So that was before my depression was even a big thing.
So you never really suffered from depression until right after that.
Yeah, I mean, I had depression in high school, but I didn't ever need to be hospitalized or anything like that. So that was good. I was able to get help. I was in therapy all through high school, took medication.
How old were you when your dad died?
I was 19.
Wow.
So my sister was 17 in high school still. So,
wow.
But he had a long struggle with depression, PTSD. He was military, survivor's guilt. And
did he ever get help for any of that?
yeah, he did. He tried anyway. But sometimes depression is not fixable for some people. And
was he on medication?
he was.
Wow.
Yeah, he was seeing a therapist. Yeah, but it was too much for him. So I'm proud of him, though, for fighting for so long. And yeah.
What are your opinions on like the military? Because they do some work with MAPS. Do you know anything about that? They do like MDMA and different treatments like that to help with like PTSD and depression and all that for veterans.
I don't know much about that at all.
Oh, you
actually,
should look into it.
But I will.
You should definitely look into that.
Yeah.
Because I guess it helps tremendously.
Well, and
I wish I could pull it up.
It's probably something new, fairly new.
Yeah, it is.
Where 10 years ago,
it wasn't available.
We probably wouldn't even be having this conversation.
No, we wouldn't.
Because
I wasn't doing it 10 years ago.
Well, there's that. But people didn't talk about depression. People didn't talk about suicide.
No.
I remember having to tell people that my dad died by suicide, and they looked at me like I was absolutely nuts. And
there was like a stigma like around it to where like there must have been something seriously wrong with that person, for them to want to do that. Or they're just selfish, or stuff like this, things like that is what people would say.
Yeah, and
but they didn't understand the capacity of somebody's mental health.
Right, and a lot of people focus on the environmental factors of a suicide. So,
what do you mean?
So, environmental factors are like a breakup, a job loss, something. I don't know. Yeah. Breakup, job loss, divorce.
Some sort of extreme
loss
event.
of a person, death of a person.
Yeah.
A lot of people just see that and think that that's why someone dies by suicide, but that's actually not true. There are 3 factors, biological, and now, of course, I'm going to forget. And I do this training like all the time. So
you want to look it up real quick? Let's look it up. We can take our time. I'm sure you could find it quicker than I can.
Well, no, because I'm on airplane mode. No, that
so I don't here, I'll let you.
Sorry, everybody.
No, you're good. They're good. I think it's important to, when we talk about things like this, to not just state it as a blanket statement, but to kind of pull it up and talk about it precisely.
Right. And I've always been taught to never guess.
Yeah, and that's
lie or
And that's the importance of doing a podcast, right? Because you're not on a TV station. It's not like we have to go to commercial break in 2 minutes.
Right.
We can take our time and pull things
And
up
do it the right way.
and do it the right way.
So I'm downloading, it's a presentation that we actually can give. It's called Talk Saves Lives, and it's an introduction to suicide prevention. And this is something that we do through the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention to communities, schools. Well, we don't do schools, but we have different programs for schools.
What's different about it for the schools?
The schools, we have to be a little bit more careful.
Yeah, you don't want to lay too much on children.
Right. And we want to make sure that the staff is capable of taking care of the students after we've done a training. So we have, It's Real for teens. It's an awesome program. I can't wait to deliver it. I haven't delivered it yet because no one's wanted it yet.
So you haven't done it in schools yet?
No. We need the schools. We need the schools to want us to come in, because we can ask to come in until we're blue in the face, and they worry about triggering people. A lot of people think that if we talk about suicide, it's going to cause suicide.
Oh, come on.
Which is not true. It's scientifically proven to be not true.
You could talk about so many different things. It's not going to cause people to go rob a bank because you talk about robbing a bank.
Right.
Like, oh, that's a good idea. Maybe I should try that.
Yes.
Yeah, no.
And
however, did you, another sidetrack, but did you hear about that school? There was a kid that committed suicide in a school this last week in Ohio.
First, I'm going to use this as a teaching opportunity. We actually don't use the term committed suicide. We instead encourage people to say died by suicide, whereas the term committed really puts stigma to it. It's you commit a crime. You wouldn't commit a heart attack. You wouldn't commit a brain aneurysm, right?
Yeah.
So
died by suicide.
It's just a linguistic.
Yeah. So you'd say died by suicide.
Or killed themselves.
By suicide.
Yep.
Interesting. I'm glad you told me that.
Yeah. But I did hear about that, I think. I don't know. I hear a lot of horrible stories.
I'm sure.
A lot of people reach out to us. And it's hard.
I just mentioned that because you mentioned how schools don't want you guys to come in and teach this, but it sounds like to me that it would be very important.
Yes, and it's needed. It's so needed, but yet the schools they're not ready. They should be ready for it. They need to be ready for it, but
because kids are committing suicide. I don't want to say committing. Sorry,
yep.
They're dying by suicide every day.
Yes.
Somebody dies of suicide every day. So, if you could create a more education around the whole thing, then,
then we could save lives.
Yeah, people can reach out and get help, right?
Yeah.
In
the programs that we have, they talk about the risk factors. They talk about protective factors. There's so much good in these presentations that I wish we could deliver them to all the schools, everybody.
So is the presentations that you guys do, are they studied as to
they're researched?
They're researched pretty heavily.
They're researched. They're evidence-based.
Okay.
So
this stuff has actually worked.
Yes. Yep. So back to the risk factors that I was talking about. The environmental risk factor is the one I was talking about. So the breakup, divorce, job loss, whatever. There's also health factors such as mental health conditions, mostly mental health factors, but there are other factors like serious chronic health conditions, chronic pain, traumatic brain injuries. And then there's historical factors. So a family history of suicide, childhood abuse, family history of mental health conditions, previous suicide attempts. And then there's other environmental factors are access to lethal means. So access to medications, a gun, a bridge, etc.
But that would kind of go under the same aspect of having a mental health problem, right? Like if you have those things and you suffer from depression or any of those other mental health um, diagnosis, it would just make it easier, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just makes it easier.
Right. And having remove those lethal means is a protective factor. So that's something that we would want to do to protect someone. So to protect myself, I have no access to the firearms that are in our home. I have no access to my own medications. My husband fills my medications every week and gives me my 1-day supply, which is an amazing thing for him to do.
Yeah.
He is amazing.
Shout out to your husband.
Yeah. Shout out, Mike. And then other protective factors, just having a culture that's smart about mental health is so important. And what we're doing today, talking about it in this depth, and, me by writing my book and sharing my story, that's what we're doing, is creating an environment that it's okay to talk about it, that it's safe to talk about it.
Yeah, and it should be.
We want people to reach out.
Yeah.
And we want people to reach out if they are struggling, but we also want people to reach out if they're concerned about somebody.
I think a lot of people are kind of afraid to talk about mental health because of the stigmas that are, attached to it. And they're afraid to talk about it publicly too, because like if this, for instance, you're on this podcast, but you suffer from mental health issues. I shouldn't say it like that, but
That's
like
okay.
mental health, you have mental health issues.
Yeah.
And, so like some people might see this and be like, wow, that person's a crazy person, or that person, like, it just wants attention, or, I've gotten that too. But, the thing is like, that's how you normalize things. And that's how you make change to things, is by bringing attention to it. And if you have mental health problems, you shouldn't be stigmatized for it.
No, and you shouldn't be ashamed about it.
You're not any less of a person. For instance, like
Correct.
you still work a normal job, you have a family, you have a husband, you have like
3 dogs.
3 dogs.
Yep.
They're probably like your kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that just alone with our history of mental health, it's kind of set a negative tone for the mental health, like the perspective of mental health is kind of been like shadowed or like tainted. We've kind of like othered people with mental health issues because of our history and where it came from. People were put into institutions and you were considered crazy and you did not belong in civilization. And we're still kind of dealing with the effects of that, I think, today. Even though we still like we are becoming more open and we're discussing things in the mental health field, and everything's getting better.
Yes, things are getting better, which is amazing. Just from 10 years ago, being afraid to tell people that my dad died by suicide, to now, I have no problem stating those words. And the response that I used to get 10 years ago was more negative, more confused, more I don't know what to do, say, or how to look at you kind of responses. Whereas the responses that I get now are, oh, I'm so sorry.
Do you like it when people say that?
I don't mind it.
Okay. I don't know what to say when somebody tells me something like that. Like, I don't know what the correct response would be, because I know that people don't like it when people say, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry that happened to you. Because like, are you really?
Right.
But like, what do you say in that spot?
Right. What do you say? There's no right or wrong answer.
No.
I mean, well, okay, I take that back. There's probably some things you shouldn't say.
You deserved it. Things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, just being compassionate and kind and listening. If the person that you're talking to really needs to just get it off their chest, like, just be there and listen to listen and not listen to respond.
Yeah.
Um,
I love that we're having this conversation because it's Mental Health Awareness Month.
it sure is.
And I've actually had a couple mental health people like in here just recently.
Awesome.
I had Katie Anderson. She's on, I don't know if you know who she is, but she is like a mental health coach. And she's actually hosting an event this weekend. But she also, her mom died by suicide.
Okay.
And I think she said she found her. I can't remember. I have to go back and listen. But and then she found herself as an adult trying to do the same thing, and she had children. And she like thought, well, I'm just repeating what happened to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so from that moment on, she didn't want to do that do that to her children.
Yeah.
But then I had Lori DeBruin in here, and she is a she's like she does like hypnotherapy and like different, she does meditation, guided meditations and stuff like that.
Awesome.
Yeah, very awesome. And she talked about how she found her brother dead when they were like, I think 7 or 8.
Oh.
And how like what kind of effect that had on her from that age till she was an adult. And she talked about how she hadn't actually handled it until she was like 40.
Yeah.
And the effects of it and everything. It's just like, wow. Like for me, I've never had to deal with anybody dying by suicide or finding anybody, but I've had other things that happened to me that, would cause so much mental health problems. But for me, fortunately, I'm young and I'm in my 20s. So I grew up in the era where it's okay to talk about it and try to find a way to fix it.
Yes.
And so fortunately for me, I'm not having to suffer from all that trauma. But
that's awesome.
For somebody who's in their 40s or 50s, and they've dealt with all this stuff their whole life, and they're still dealing with it, and they don't know how to fix it or change it because it's just the cycle of life now. This stuff has been, buried and buried and buried.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with that. I, when I was at my worst, that was my thought process. My dad did this, so I can too. And that was my sick brain talking.
What?
And it's, I don't know. Yeah.
What is your opinion of people when they say, well, why would they do that? Because they have somebody, or they have children, or they have this, or they have that, or why would they do that? Because they got so much good going for them. Like, it's so easy to make things look good from the outside, right?
Right.
But people don't truly know what's going on
right.
inside your mind.
Just like the risk factors that I talked about, the health, environmental, and physical, and it's hard for me when people say, that my dad was selfish because he had kids to think about. That's the one that gets me. Because I don't think he was selfish. I think he was sick. And unfortunately, suicide is the means of death for depression. And it's hard. It's hard because people don't understand. Sometimes they don't want to listen to the real reasons. But when someone comes up to me and says, oh, I'm so sorry he was selfish.
Wow. Why would somebody has balls to say that?
I've heard it many times, unfortunately. And I say, actually, he fought for a long time. He's probably the bravest person I know. And he was very, very sick.
I think a lot of people, when they hear about somebody dying by suicide, I'm really glad you told me that. I know I keep saying it, but it's because it's one of those things that I hadn't been educated on. And so now it's like, it's something I've always said, and now I need to learn how to change that.
Yep.
But I do like that died by suicide rather than committed suicide.
Yeah.
But where were they going with this? I think when people, find out that somebody died by suicide, they think of that act as them as a person rather than, focusing on all the good that had happened and the life that they did live. And that moment defines who that person is for the rest of time.
Yeah.
For everybody else.
I have to remind people that my dad was a volunteer firefighter. He was in the military. He saved lives. He helped people. He was a good person. He was kind of an asshole. I don't know if I can say that on here.
You can say whatever you want. I've been swearing too, so.
But he did so much good with his life that how can his last act erase all of that?
Yeah.
It doesn't.
Well, and I think it should say something too when, people of every generation and every income, like there's been so many people that died by suicide. I mean, look at like Robin Williams and like
even
some of the
just
greats.
Recently, the child dance star or whatever, it came out that she died by suicide at 16, and then the Judd. The mom.
I can't remember her name.
I can't remember her first name, but she died by suicide after a long, long struggle with mental illness.
So I think
it doesn't discriminate.
No, it doesn't, and I think that should say something because, like sure you could want to die by suicide, if you have money problems or if you have all these problems, but that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter.
There's more to it.
There's more to it.
I mean, there are people who will take their life solely for a environmental reason, but most often there's more to it. More often there's mental health condition. 1 in 5 Americans are going to have a mental health condition at some point in their life. So why aren't we talking about this?
Yeah.
Like we talk about diabetes or cancer or anything, heart disease, So that's why I take every opportunity and reached out to you to do this podcast or write my book or go on the news and share my story that way.
Yeah, you said you're always on the news. So what do they talk to you about when you go on the news?
Usually it's associated with whatever fundraising event we're doing.
Okay.
Or like we do State Capitol Day where we talk to our representatives and senators about certain legislature that we want to get passed.
What legislature do you guys want to pass?
There is, have you heard of the National Crisis Lifeline?
Yeah.
Well, in July, that crisis line is actually going to change to a 3-digit number.
Like a 911.
Yep, it's going to be 988.
Oh.
And
it should definitely be in one number, like 711 or something.
Right.
Just
right.
make it more simple.
Yeah, but it's great, but we have to be able to support that. And so we're asking for funding and for infrastructure for this lifeline.
How much money does that take? How much are you guys fundraising for?
Well, we fundraise not specifically for that.
Okay.
We fundraise to do our programs and stuff like that.
Okay.
But I mean, it's not a cheap thing by any means. I mean, this is a nationwide thing that's happening.
Why does that cost any money though? It shouldn't cost any money. Right? I mean, other than having to have people.
Well, we're expecting that the number of calls are going to increase because it's easy to remember.
Oh, okay.
So we need more crisis lifeline workers. I'm not an expert in the policy world.
Yeah.
So I don't have a ton of answers.
So has there been any pushback for any of that stuff?
Not much.
No. How could you push back against that?
Right. I mean, yeah, they have questions, about the money,
Yeah.
about, how is this going to be stable, how is it going to have stability and stuff like that. But uh,
So would it be kind of like funded by like tax
so it would
money?
be funded just like 911 is funded,
Okay.
which if you ask me how 911 is funded, I do not know.
Well, it
But
would be through like the police department and like people writing tickets, and that's how that's how things get funded, right?
I'm not sure. But I could get some answers for you guys and
Yeah.
um,
It'd be interesting.
give them to
It'd
you.
be interesting to
I
find out.
know that it is when you buy a phone, there's a fee in there somewhere for 911,
Really?
and there will be a fee for 988.
Wow. So it's
That's
gonna make phones more expensive?
barely.
Barely. I honestly didn't
Barely.
know there was a fee for 911.
I that is what I am led to understand. So,
Well, they better answer right away when I call.
well, and that's one of the things, that's one of the big things with 988. A lot of people who call the crisis line get put on hold.
Wow.
And I mean, speaking from experience, if you're in a suicidal crisis,
You need somebody now.
I need someone now. I can't.
So when you
And then to be put on hold makes it seem like no one cares.
yeah.
And now my suicide might be even more imminent.
Yeah.
So
When you call the crisis line, do they dispatch police to your home? How do they get you to stop? Do they just talk you?
they are trained in crisis intervention.
Okay.
And, if the situation deems necessary, then yes, they will dispatch whatever needs to be dispatched.
Okay. Wow.
Which we're hoping as the world progresses in the life of mental health that we'll have more crisis intervention teams or people who are specifically trained in dealing with a suicidal crisis
Mm.
who will be dispatched instead of the police or in with the police anyway.
That would be a heavy job, wouldn't it?
It would be a very heavy job.
Could
but
you imagine
it's
coming home every day?
so needed.
It would be needed, but I couldn't imagine doing that.
I couldn't do it. I could not be a Lifeline worker. So those people, man, props to you guys
Yeah.
who volunteer, because most of them are volunteers.
Wow.
So, yeah.
What do you think about like police departments having social workers on hand?
Love it.
Love it.
Hmm.
I know that Lansing had one. I talked to the mayor once, and he said that Lansing had one. But then, like a couple months after I talked to him, she resigned.
Probably because it was that bad,
Yeah, it's
that
stressful.
hard of a job.
Yeah,
But
it's a hard job.
a lot of our officers in the area have been through crisis intervention training, which is great. But we really would love mobile response teams who are specifically there for the crisis.
Yeah.
But that's something that's down the pipeline, that we're hoping to get more
Funding, everything. Yeah, it takes a lot.
It takes a lot. Yeah, a lot of manpower, a lot of legislature. So we're hopeful for the future.
What kind of things have you seen? I mean, because obviously 2010, when your father died, marked a very important, like, it was a very important time in your life. It was a very important time for you to start focusing on mental health, especially for yourself, but as well as becoming an advocate for those alike. What kind of things have you seen change from that time till now?
I've seen more people reaching out for help. With COVID, actually, we saw an increase in calls to the Lifeline. That means people are reaching out, and that is great. That is an improvement. I didn't even know there was a crisis line
I didn't either.
when I was 19. Now, on the back of all high school ID badges is the Crisis Lifeline.
Wow.
And that's something that we helped facilitate.
That is awesome.
So that they have the Lifeline with them all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen the stigma change with how people talk.
It's more normalized now, especially amongst younger people, like coming up in school.
Mm-hmm.
They talk about, I almost think it is normalized, but I also think that a lot of people want something to be wrong with them because they almost like there's a tension that's surrounded. You get one thing I've realized, because I know some people who were in high school and they got some extra help and everything. They kind of just skated by school. They didn't have to work too hard because they could just say that they had this issue. And so I think definitely some young people may take advantage of that. However, I think that it's so normalized now in the young population that it's not looked down upon. And I don't remember where I was going with this.
Yeah,
but we definitely, society's definitely taken a turn for mental health.
Yes.
It's not.
I agree. I'm not sure where you were going with
I'm not sure
because I
either.
don't know if I agree or not.
Well,
depending on, because
I think
we are identifying mental illness in youth more than we were.
Do you think it's
But is that
great? Do you think it's greater now than it ever used to be? Because that could be the issue.
Probably.
I think
we've got a lot of risk factors for our children. Social media, bullying, which have always been, well, not social media, but some of that has always been around.
Yeah, but you could leave it at school.
You know, I don't know. I'm not an expert in that.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. I think they're being diagnosed because, well, that's something that has changed, is that now when you go to the doctor, you're most likely, I don't know if every doctor has changed, I'm sure some haven't, that you get a depression screening.
Really?
If you go to my ER.
How do you screen for that?
There's certain questions, and if you score a certain score.
What kind of questions do they ask?
I mean, it's also, like, I'm just going by, like, what my emergency department questions are.
Okay.
Because they also ask, like, do you feel safe at home? And they straight up ask, have you been having thoughts of suicide?
Do you think that most people who are in that position are honest?
We have found that, yeah, most often people are honest. Like, they'll be coming to the ER for something else.
Okay.
And then we ask them that question, and we are able to start a conversation about something that they didn't even know.
See, I would think
could have been an issue.
I think if it were me, I'd be afraid to answer yes, because I would be afraid if I'm going to be held there and they're not going to let me go home.
Yeah. I don't know what their policy is in regards to that. But it is investigated further.
Yeah.
You know, because if you are suicidal, I don't remember the numbers, a certain number of people who died by suicide have actually been to see their doctor within the last year or 6 months. So if we're asking the questions, potentially we're catching these people who could be at risk a lot sooner. But it depends on the doctor's office. It depends on how seriously they take it.
Yeah.
I know my personal doctor doesn't take it very seriously, and that infuriates me. But
are they a part of a different generation?
No.
No.
I mean, no. But, you know, to each office, they have their own protocols, they have their own practice, you know, they have their own way of doing things. So it's hard for us to make change. Like, like that.
Yeah.
But it is happening.
Yeah.
It is. I've seen it. I work for Spectrum, and we have our Zero Suicide Initiative, and there have been a lot of changes, which are so cool.
What does that mean?
More screening,
Okay.
the screening through the ER for pediatrics and adults. And then I actually get to speak at their gala next month because the foundation, the Spectrum Health Foundation, is actually donating to the behavioral health units at Spectrum. So that's huge. So I'm super excited for that.
Makes me extremely sad is when a child wants to die by suicide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It makes me extremely sad for them because I feel that when they're young and they want to die, that it's only going to get greater and greater as they get older if they don't get the proper help that's needed.
Potentially, yeah.
And it just makes me like so sad for the hope of their life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like,
and a lot of people will be, that's where a lot of the stigma and stuff comes in, or like, you know, they had their whole life ahead of them. They yada, yada, yada. Hold that to yourself because this kid probably had a lot of stuff going on that we don't know about.
Yeah.
And it sucks.
Yeah.
That we weren't able to catch it.
My
but
my adopted mom, after I had left the home, had gotten other foster children in the house, and they had this one kid. I believe his name was his first name was like Alex or something. I don't remember. Anyways, he was no, it wasn't. His name was Jason. His name was Jason. Cutest little kid. I love this kid. He had one eye. Yeah, and he had the sweetest heart. And when he was in the home, my adopted mom, she was extremely abusive. Like I'm not sure if she was physically to him, but she was abusive mentally and emotionally. And there were several times where she told him, you're never going to amount to anything if you don't do your schoolwork. And that stuck with him. It like did something in his brain. And so when he eventually was taken out of that home because there was just too much going on, he went to another foster home, and they had a 2-story house, and they had a balcony, and he tried jumping off the balcony to die. He wanted to die. And when they asked him why, he did jump at one point, and his foster dad caught him, which was amazing. Like how, like how did that go about? But anyways, when they asked him why, he said it's because the previous person said I would never make anything of myself. And it's like, wow, like just saying that impacts somebody so young, you know, to the point where they're like, I'm not going to make anything of myself anyways. I might as well just die.
Yeah. And that's terrifying. And that just goes to show like what we say matters. And that goes for everybody. Parents to their children, children to their parents, teachers to students. To be told that you're nothing, that you're worthless, that's going to perpetuate this growing depression, self-loathing, and could potentially be fatal. And
especially if you're speaking about a child's future and their quality of life, and like, oh, you're not gonna make anything of yourself anyways. Like, you might as well just give up now. Or and it could be said for anything, like a child in sports, and they have an extremely aggressive parent who wants them to do well, and they just can't. They're not skilled or whatever it is, you know.
Yeah.
Like, that's why it's important to be supportive. And even kind.
Just be kind.
Yeah. Even if they're not good at it. Good job. You tried. Good job. Very good job.
Yes.
You're doing it. You're still doing it.
There's always something kind you can say instead of the horrible things.
You need to do
that.
better.
Yeah.
You need to do better. You did not play good today.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what causes trauma, right?
Yes.
And then in turn creates generational trauma because
Mm-hmm.
then, you were told that as a kid and then
Yeah.
you will tell your kids that. I mean, you can stop it, but
Mm-hmm.
typically that's what happens.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Yeah. We are an hour in.
Wow.
That went by super quick.
Awesome.
Do you feel tired from that?
A little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah. You kind of had to dig down deep emotionally and mentally.
Yeah, but I mean, it's all for a good reason.
Yeah.
You know, if one person listens to this and decides to get help, or you learning to not say committed suicide, and,
Yeah.
then I did what I was here to do.
Absolutely.
So,
I learned something.
yeah.
That's what's important. I learned something every
exactly.
podcast.
Oh, I'm
Usually,
sure.
usually
I'm
every
sure.
podcast I learned something. I learned that I'm an idiot. So, but no, I think it's important for people to know not to say committed suicide.
Yeah. And that there's always hope and there's always help. And all you have to do is ask.
Yeah. I think that's very difficult though.
It is very difficult, but
And then that goes back to us needing to have the resources available so everybody knows where to go. I mean, everybody knows when somebody breaks in your house to call 911.
Right.
Everybody knows when you have an altercation with somebody, call 911. They know when anything happens that involves the law enforcement having to get involved, call 911. Everybody knows that. Everybody should know who to call when they need mental health help.
Yep.
Or suicidal prevention help.
Which the current Lifeline is 1-800-273-8255.
Yeah, that's not okay.
Or you can text 741-741. So
that's
if anybody
okay.
listening,
that's too long,
can reach a Lifeline through those. And then in July it'll change to 988. And the regular Lifeline will be still available for a while.
Okay.
Because obviously we don't want to miss
Transition
anybody.
period.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'll also put that in the show notes too.
Cool.
Is there anything else you want to promote while we're on here? You volunteer with who again?
The American Foundation for Suicide Prevention.
Do you guys have any upcoming events or?
We have a coloring fundraiser happening next Friday at American Fifth at 6:00. It's $10 and you get to color your little heart away. There are hundreds of coloring pages, hundreds of utensils. So come on out, color with us, take an evening to relax, and help fundraise for suicide prevention.
Awesome. Thank you, Vicky, for doing this. It was fun talking to you, and I feel like we didn't talk about you all that much.
This is me, though. This is me. A lot of people have called me the suicide girl.
Oh my gosh.
Because they're missing the suicide prevention girl part of it. But this is what I live for. This is what I do. If I can save a life, that's all I can ask for.
This is your 13 Reasons Why? No, I'm just joking. What is your opinion of that show real quick?
I have not seen it.
No.
So I truly, at the beginning, it was an issue, but the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention actually got involved, and they now have the Crisis Lifeline and information at the beginning and end of the show. So if you're going to make a show like that, at least give the resources.
It kind of like glorified.
Yeah.
It, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Which we don't want to do.
Yeah.
But
I watched, I think, the first season of it, and then I didn't watch anymore. But yeah, it was like kind of glorifying it.
I mean, and it can be triggering for people who struggle, which is why I didn't watch it.
Yeah.
But now AFSP works with Netflix for any show that has suicidal content or loss of someone to suicide. AFSP kind of just works with them to make sure it's safe.
That's
which is pretty cool.
One thing I was watching the show. It's called A Million Reasons
Mhm.
Why
Mhm.
or something like that.
Mhm.
Or A Million Little Things. I think it's Million Little Things. And at the end of every episode that has like some sort of like issue, a
Traumatizing.
traumatizing thing, they have something, some sort of link or whatever it is. Like if it's suicidal prevention, they have that link, and
Yep.
then abuse, and
Yep.
they have
Yep.
different things at the end of each episode. I'm like, that's really cool.
Yeah.
That is super cool.
That's an improvement.
Yeah.
That's an advancement, and that's amazing.
Yeah.
We are making a difference. We are.
We are. All right.
So thank you for allowing me to share my passion with everybody, and see you soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.